So I'm just going to start by kind of rewinding slightly uh, and just trying to see where the Samgrahavastus, the means of unification, fit into the overall scheme of our practice. So I wanted to start with the three jewels. So the Buddha, of course, is the first of the three jewels, and the Buddha is the fountainhead of the whole tradition that we practice. And it would seem that when people encountered the Buddha, they had a profound experience of something being woken within them that they had previously been unaware of, a perspective that they had no idea even existed. And they wanted to, in their lives, bring that out more fully, fully realize that perspective, fully realize and embody the potential that they discovered that they had. And that's just not people in the past who met the Buddha face to face, but people like us who've met the Buddha through imagination, or through a story, or through an image, or through a teaching. And then, of course, there's the Dharma being the path that the Buddha taught, the path of transformation. And when we recite the refuges, we also recite the precepts. And the precepts, in a way, like an epitomized version of the path. And then, of course, there's the Sangha. So that's when our commitment to the Buddha and the Dharma comes into relationship with other people's commitment to the Buddha and the Dharma. And again, we say, don't we? I go for refuge to the Sangha. We say it 3 times when we recite the refuges and the precepts, which we've been doing every morning on this retreat. And what happens here is like I say, our commitment and our engagement with the Buddha and the Dharma comes into relationship with others. And I think it's important to realize that that's a natural thing. It's not that that the Sangha and other people and the Samgrahavastus is something kind of added on, or something less important or something different from what we're doing when we meditate. What the Sangha is the same process of transformation operating in a different mode or in a different aspect. And it's very interesting, even looking at it from the point of view of meditation, that the Buddha, when the Buddha talks about mental states, the kinds of mental states that we're trying to transform and the ones that we're trying to develop, he talks about them relationally. He talks about them explicitly relationally. So there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called the Vedavataka Sutta, which is the sutta on the 2 types of thought. And the Buddha says this: Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisatta, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into 2 classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty, and I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So non-ill will is equivalent to metta, and non-cruelty is equivalent to compassion. So often in Pali, you get a kind of a negative word, which connotes something entirely positive. But the point that I'm making is that even when the Buddha's talking about the transformation of his mind, he's talking, the mental states that he's talking about, the mental states that he's describing are relational. They arise in relation to other people. So that, this developing of a Sangha, or gathering a Sangha, is part of the same process that we're engaging in when we meditate. Just engaging in a different way. It feels particularly, the reason I'm saying that is because we're on a retreat and we're doing quite a bit of meditation. And I think it's important that we see the topic that we're discussing in terms of the Samgrahavastus is integral to that process, rather than something, as it were, taped onto the side or tangential. It's not. It's central to the process and the practice and the commitment to going for refuge to the 3 jewels. And I think one of the things that that's really interesting about the Sangha is, in a way, the Buddha and the Dharma are already there. But the Sangha comes into being as we go for refuge to it. It's like our engagement with it brings it into being as a living reality for each other. Probably the same are true in a different way for the Buddha and the Sangha and the Dharma, but I think with the Sangha, it's fascinating that we talk about it as if it's this thing, but it only comes into existence when we engage with it. If we don't, it's just an idea, it's just an abstract thought. So what we're concerned with the Samgrahavastus is making the Sangha a living reality. And the Buddha points out these 4 conditions for this process of developing, of gathering, of a Sangha, these 4 conditions. And he's obviously picked them out because they're the most important ones. So I'm sure the Buddha could have taught 20 things that would give rise to the development of a Sangha, of unifying a Sangha. But he pointed out these particular 4, which we're looking at on this retreat, the 4 Samgrahavastus. And I think it's really worth reflecting on, well, why these 4? Why these 4 in particular? What's particular about these 4 that particularly give rise to Sangha? So we heard already about dana, about generosity and giving. We've heard about priyavadata, kindly speech. Tomorrow, I think, is it tomorrow or the next day? Anyway, we'll hear about samanatata, exemplification. And today we're looking at atacharya, beneficial activity. So I just thought I'd talk about the words a little bit, just to give it a bit of a sense. So ata, the word atacharya comprises of 2 words. Ata basically means good. It can also mean meaning or purpose or aim. And it's in the Buddha's given name. So the Buddha was called Siddhartha, which is the word siddhi, like attainment, and the word ata. I've also got a friend called Arta Siddhi, which is those 2 words the other way around. And there's actually quite a few order members in our order with the name with the word Arta in their name. And it's also the word Arta comes in its Pali form, Atta, in the beginning of the Metta Sutta. So it says in the beginning of the Metta Sutta, a very famous teaching of the Buddha, if you know what is truly good for you, and understand the possibility of reaching the state of perfect peace, then this is how you need to live. So when we say, if you know what is truly good for you, that word good is atta. So you can see how it can become to mean the goal as well. It's the good in the sense of the goal. And charya kind of means doing. You find that word in Bodhicharya Vatara, Brahmacharya, Dharmacharya, those our order, we're titled Dharmacharis and Dharmacharinis, and that word chari is a different form of the word charya. So Dharmacharis, order members, enter into the Dharmacharya, the life where you're doing the Dharma, so to speak. So in a way, it's quite a straightforward meaning. It means beneficial activity, doing good. And what that means, of course, in this context is doing good for others that will help them to benefit dharmically or to benefit spiritually, to grow and develop, to attain higher levels of being and consciousness. So that's what it means. It means benefiting others in that kind of way. So the question that I'm always left with Atacharya is well, what is it about this one which is different from dana? So obviously with dana, it's all about helping other people. We heard that the day before yesterday. It's about giving them what they need materially, giving them time, giving them the gift of fearlessness, giving them education and culture, all of these things, and giving the Dharma. So if that's all covered by dana, if it's all covered by the Samgrahavastus of generosity, what's Artacharya pointing to, which is different from that? Obviously, it's pointing to something, otherwise the Buddha wouldn't have mentioned it. So the way Bante talks about it, and I think it's compelling, as he talks about it in terms of sharing your inspiration. So obviously, it's important to give people the information that they need to impart the teachings and the practices and the knowledge. That's important, even essential. But yeah, what's more essential than that is sharing inspiration, sharing the kind of quintessence of that connection that you have with the three jewels themselves, that spark that was ignited by the Buddha, that you're passing that on. Now, quite how that happens is a little bit mysterious, and we get into the kind of mystery of human communication. But you catch that spark, something, the tinder within you is ignited by that spark that was ignited in you by your encounter with the three jewels in one form or another. Probably for most of us, it will be our encounter with a Kalyana Mitra, a friend in the Sangha. So that's what we're sharing with Artacharya. What we're sharing is that quintessence of our inspiration. So a little quote from Walt Whitman, the American 19th century poet. "Behold, I do not give lectures or a little charity. When I give myself." So again, I think it's something a bit hard to put your finger on. I always used to wonder what that meant, but I think actually hearing that quote in the context of Artacharya, I think I've got a little bit more of a sense of what Walt was talking about. You're just giving of yourself, not in any particular form, but it's just that essential act of giving of yourself, and that sparks people off. So you can share your enthusiasm for the Dharma life, for the adventure of it, just for the sheer adventure of it, the thrill of it, the beauty of it, the excitement of the newness that the Dharma reveals. So yeah, it's kind of you could say it's kind of like almost like an X factor that you're trying to communicate. And of course, as I've said already, this particularly is what is being transmitted, as it were, in Kalyana Mitrata, in spiritual friendship, that inspiration. And I've been thinking, particularly recently when we've been doing a lot of stuff online, I've been reflecting on, the difference between encountering somebody in person and encountering a record of something, or encountering somebody through a digital medium. And particularly, I think I noticed this when I read the text of a talk and when I listen to a talk. So I've been doing a little bit of study with some of the guys on Monday nights. We have a men's Mitra group, and we've actually been looking at recently the series of lectures of Dharma talks that Samgrahavastus did in the late 70s on the Vimalakirti Nirdesha. And in one of those talks, he talks about the Samgrahavastus. And it's been really interesting listening to the talk and then reading the text of the talk in the book that was published, of the transcript of those talks, and just noticing the kind of difference. So that the text will give you the content, the line of thought, the particular words that are used. When you listen, you catch the inspiration that Samgrahavastus has, the feel that he has for the Dharma. It adds another dimension, and a significant dimension. It's not a trifling dimension. And again, I was thinking it's a little bit like the difference between reading a play and going and seeing a play. Reading a play, you get a bit of a sense of who the characters are, what they say to each other, the action, the setting, all of those things. But when you see a play really, really well performed, really well acted, and so on, It's that the meaning, the inspiration from the players is transmitted in a much more forcible way. So that's what we're trying to do is communicate that inspiration. And I'm trying to say something about that, and it's a bit tricky actually. As I'm talking about it, I'm realizing how tricky it is to say what that X factor is, because it's an X factor. It's hard to describe. But one thing I do want to say is that it is actually something that takes courage to share your enthusiasm or your idealism, to share what you really value and what you think is worth something, to share that with others, to communicate that to others, to be open about that, takes courage. I think it's probably fair to say that we live in a sort of cynical kind of age. And if you express value publicly, it opens you up to criticism, even scorn, particularly if what you're declaring is your regard for religion. So I use that word slightly reluctantly, but there is an element of the Buddhism which is kind of religious in the sense that it's pointing to something that is transcendental. It's not a material thing. It's a value which can't be captured or defined in terms of, well, reason even. The Buddha himself said that the Dharma is a takavatra. It's beyond the sphere of reason. So what we're declaring, if we say that we're a Buddhist, is that we are religious in that sense. And I find that a bit, if I'm honest, a little bit embarrassing. It kind of runs against my materialist upbringing. But I feel that it's important that I do that. I feel a little bit, again, I'm speaking personally here, a little bit like a recovering cynic. And I can relapse quite easily. But maybe many of you feel similarly. But I notice this particularly when I'm in India, and when I meet members of our Buddhist community who are Indian. They're not like that at all. Actually, quite the reverse. They're quite willing and quite happy to talk about what they're inspired by, really, really openly and really disarmingly. They just wear their heart on their sleeve. I find it such a tonic to be around. They'll just tell you how much they love their friend, quite openly and quite sincerely. So they're sincere, and they're willing to be open about their sincerity, if you see what I mean. And it's really, really disarming. It's really, really lovely, because they're not trying to. They're just being honest. They're just being honest. And I think this is part of. I mentioned the 5 precepts earlier. I think this is part of the 4th precept. The 4th precept is not just about abstaining from falsehood. That's important. It's also about speaking the truth. And, if we have a response to the 3 jewels, that's true. That's real. And if we're going to communicate ourselves truthfully, that needs to be included in what we communicate. Now, obviously, one doesn't want to be naive or kind of shrill about that, or even egotistical about it. But when the occasion arises, we need to be truthful about that. We need to be honest about that. If we're really going to take the 4th precept seriously, so that we're communicating what we're inspired by, and we're living by what we're inspired by. And there's an element, I think, of this which is about being faithful. I'm reminded that when we join the order in our ordination ceremony, we take 4 vows, acceptance vows, the verses of acceptance of the ordination. One of them is, with loyalty to my teachers, I accept this ordination. So it feels like if I'm going to be true to what I've received, if I'm going to be faithful to the people who've benefited me, I need to have the courage to pass that on and to share what I'm inspired by. It's part of that relationship which I have with my teachers and even, my companions in the Dharma life, to be loyal to them. What that really means is, or part of what that means, is to communicate my inspiration to other people. So they've done that for me, and that's been hugely important in my Dharma life. So I need to do that for others. We all need to do that for others, because again, that's what the Samgrahavastus are about. Is about others. It's about helping others to become part of our spiritual community. And it's one of those lovely things that when you do that, when you share your inspiration waxes. And so it benefits you, and it also benefits other people. And I think this is one of the really beautiful things about the Sangha, is that if we engage with it, it draws things out of us that will remain latent if we don't put ourselves into that situation. I constantly have the experience of, coming along to a Dharma class or doing a retreat and not feeling particularly inspired. And in the process of communication and just being with people on the basis of our shared commitment, the inspiration arises. It's there, it's just kind of latent. It just needs to be drawn out. It needs to be stimulated. And we do that for each other. It's a really, really important function of Sangha, that everybody benefits. We'll hear a little bit in a moment about that. There's a little reading I want to share, which I'll close with. So I think part of this, and this again is where the challenge is, I talked about that requiring courage, and I think part of it is allowing ourselves to be seen, and that can be challenging, is allowing ourselves to be seen. So a lot of us do a lot of dissembling, a lot of covering over aspects of our character, probably for quite good reasons, maybe out of self-protection. Hopefully, when we come into the context of the spiritual community, we can be much more open. We can let go of some of those veils of dissembling. The example actually that popped into my mind was I went to secondary school, like probably a lot of us did, and I was into music, and I remember borrowing a tape. Remember those of some Mozart symphonies? I'm reminded of this because the Irish Chamber Orchestra played them quite recently, and I went along. And I remember talking with the person who lent me the tape. Was my history teacher, Mr. Mawson, who was a Buddhist. I never got to talk to him about Buddhism, but even knowing that there was a person who was a Buddhist who taught at Tikipunga High School in Whangarei in New Zealand was kind of amazing. But anyway, I remember waxing enthusiastic about these Mozart symphonies with my history teacher in the hearing of some of my classmates, and that was a bad move. and I quickly copped on to the fact that I kind of knew it. I think I just caught out that wasn't something that I wanted to share with my classmates. So, you just put that to one side and you don't share it. You leave it, okay, that's in my little private compartment. And probably a lot of us have got private compartments. And some of the things that we put in our private compartments are maybe things that we're ashamed of. But also some of the things that we put in our private compartments are things that we're inspired by, and we just leave them there, which is a pity. So part of the Sangha is that we're trying to create an opportunity for those private compartments to be opened up and those inspirations to be shared, and for them to spark other people off. I mean, there's a lot more that can be said about that. Like, for example, I mean, it might be something to discuss, like, why do we do that? Why do we dissemble? Like, for example, in New Zealand, where I'm from, we have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if people recognize that expression, tall poppy syndrome, but the idea is that you've got a field of poppies, and if one of the poppies comes up too high, He'll get his head chopped off. So you want to kind of remain hidden in the kind of mass, and hidden in the group, so that nobody sees you. Because if they do, they're going to chop you down. They don't like people who just stick out. So it has quite a strong effect on one's kind of internal world, because you're constantly kind of restraining yourself from sticking out in any kind of way. So again, it can stop you from just being who you actually are. So you might become a sort of person who tries to make themselves invisible. So I've certainly spent a good part of my life trying to do that, just trying to kind of blend into the plasterboard so that nobody notices. But you can also do it the other way. I think you can dissemble. You can hide yourself by being highly visible, but only revealing a particular persona or a particular aspect of your character, your total character. So friendship, I think, is probably where most of us will be able to explore this area, because I'm not saying that we all have to kind of, go to the nearest street corner and stand on a soapbox and start proclaiming our inspiration, although that might be a really good thing. But we can start by just talking with our friends about sharing our inspirations. Yesterday, Maitrikai talked about rejoicing in other people behind their back. But yeah, and we can also talk about what we find inspiring. And one thing that didn't come up yesterday, unless I missed it, was the pointing out of one's own faults. So this comes out in our puja, doesn't it? We have a section where we just delight in the ideal at the beginning of the puja. We worship, there's salutation, we make offerings, we commit ourselves and they're going for refuge. And then there's the confession of faults, where we just point out our faults and then we rejoice and then we ask for a teaching. So strangely, I mean, it's a bit, you wouldn't expect it, but actually hearing somebody pointing out a fault of theirs can be extremely inspiring. Someone confessing something. When you hear that confession, what you hear, what you witness is the person's aspiration, their dismay in a way at doing something that they really wish they hadn't done, and you really feel their inspiration and their aspiration and their commitment. So some of the most inspiring communications I've been in when I've heard somebody actually confessing, or when I've done it myself. Now, again, that requires a context. Communication's always contextual, but again, you create the context that you need in order to have the context to share your inspiration. So if you create the context by doing the thing that creates. You have the context by creating the context. If you see what I mean, that's how you do it. It doesn't exist. You bring it into being by sharing your inspiration, and then you've got a context to share your inspiration, and hopefully that will deepen. I hope you get what I'm meaning. I'm being slightly inelegant with the way I'm putting it, but what's a pity is if you wait around for the context, not realizing that you create the context by taking a risk in communication, of sharing, opening that compartment. And letting your inspiration out, so to speak. So I've talked about fearlessness, and I suppose I've talked about courage, and the courage to be truthful to what is inspiring, and how that is a gift. So Tara, you can just, you might be able to make her out. She's just here. That's white Tara, but Tara appears in different forms, as we heard last night. There's white Tara, there's green Tara, there's red Tara. In fact, there's a myriad forms of Tara, and in the white and the green form, at least, she has these two hand gestures, these two mudras, and in her left hand, you can see, in this hand here, I don't know if you can see that, but take it from me. She has her hand up in this mudra, sorry, this mudra, with their three fingers extending. So that's the fearlessness mudra. And on the other hand, her hand is open outwards. So that's the mudra of generosity. So she's just there, being fearless and being herself. It's curious. I mean, when she appears, she's just sitting there. She's not really doing anything in the ordinary sense, but just her being who she is, the quintessence of compassion, the quick way to wisdom, just her being there communicates something. And there's a kind of poise and a willingness to exist that's beneficial. So when you see her, you benefit from that encounter. And I think that epitomizes what I'm talking about, that there's just something about, we can do that at our own level. We can just be who we are and communicate who we are, and that will enable other people to be who they really are. So again, a little aphorism of Samgrahavastus: it is a virtue to be ornamental as well as useful. It is a virtue to be ornamental as well as useful. So I wanted to finish by reading a little piece from the Vimalakirti Nirdesha. As I said, the kind of locus classicalis for this teaching in Tirana is a talk that Samgrahavastus gave on the Samgrahavastus as part of the Vimalakirti, the series of talks he did on the Vimalakirti Nirdesha. And there's a particular little episode in that text. I can't begin to describe the whole context because it'll take us too far astray. But in this context, basically, there's these goddesses. There's loads of them actually, and they meet Vimalakirti, and they live in the abode of Mara. So Mara is the kind of personification of doubt, of the karma. He's the lord of the Kamaloka, the lord of the sense realm, the desire realm, and he represents everything that kind of holds us back. And these goddesses, having appeared to Vimalakirti, are going back to the realm of Mara. So they're going back to a difficult place, and Vimalakirti, at their request, if I remember rightly, gives them a bit of a teaching. So they're sort of saying, well, how can I live in the realm of Mara? How can I live in the realm of Mara? And maybe that's a question we have, is how can I live in this world? It's too difficult. How can I live here? This is what Vimalakirti says to them. And I'll just read that and then I'll finish. Vimalakirti replied, "Sisters, there is a door of the Dharma called the inexhaustible lamp. Practice it. What is it? Sisters, a single lamp may light hundreds of thousands of lamps without itself being diminished. Likewise, sisters, a single bodhisattva may establish many hundreds of thousands of living beings in enlightenment without their mindfulness being diminished. In fact, not only does it not diminish, it grows stronger. Likewise, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to these virtuous qualities. This is the door of the Dharma called the inexhaustible lamp. When you are living in the realm of Mara, inspire innumerable gods and goddesses with the spirit of enlightenment. In such a way, you will repay the kindness of the Tathagata, the Buddha, and you will become the benefactors of all living beings."